Well, hello, friends. I hope you're all well. Thanks for joining me today. Uh, I'm really excited to be here. I love the fact that I get the opportunity to talk to you about identity, and there are so many stories to talk about because we'll start with back in 2007 when I was a young developer, and I was commissioned to write a CMS, a content management system for a company. And one of the things I have to do in the CMS is manage users. So, in my infinite wisdom as a young developer without enough experience, I decided to write my own identity system to manage those users. And it turns out that it's a lot more than just managing a secret password and a username. It takes a lot of effort to understand the complexities of an identity system like password resets, protecting the system against brute force attacks, protecting the system against bots that could sign up and create accounts willy-nilly. There were a lot of things, so it turns out that it was a major undertaking. It took me almost 2 months to come to grips with how to write the system. And looking back now, I feel really silly because there is a better way in doing that. So today I'm going to be covering how developers should approach identity, why they should avoid writing their own identity systems, and which options do you have. So walking out from this session, you'll know exactly which identity provider system to choose, why you should choose it, and how to integrate with your solution, whether you're using .NET or JavaScript or some other language that you need for your system, and how that scales and works for you. So three major things that we'll be looking at throughout this session. And I want to, of course, thank our sponsors for making this a reality. I know that events are hard to put together, especially an event with so many sessions, and I truly appreciate the support. And we are here from Microsoft as well to support this event by being here and talking to you. So thanks very much for joining me, and thanks very much to our sponsors. In case you're wondering what I do and who I am, my name is Christos Matskas. I work as a program manager for the Microsoft Identity Platform. I speak to developers and I hope to inspire you to write better, more secure software. So working out of this session, if you can take one or two things, is that identity is hard. It doesn't have to be hard though. And we have ways to make your life easier and make it uh, help you get in the pit of success if you want. If you like what you see, if you are interested in learning more about identity, we also have a twice weekly show on Twitch. It's free for everyone. You just sign in on Twitch and you can come and see us, the 45 show. We also have a YouTube channel where all our content gets there. So if you like and want to learn more, if you want to join us on the stream and also learn how to build identity solutions end to end or solutions with identity end to end, then this is the place to be, the 45 show on Twitch. So, assuming that your manager comes to you and says, Michael, I want you to go and build a website for us. I want you to authenticate users. Then the first thing that we don't want you to do is obviously create your own identity store, because as I said, this is one of the things that you should not be doing yourself. All these companies over here have fallen victims of cyber attacks in the past. They had users' information falling in their own hands because something in their platform was not done correctly. And you can see that this industry is very different. You have Dropbox, you have Pizza Hut, you have Domino's, you have Adobe, you have Creative. These companies are not in one domain. They're not IT companies, to be honest, but they have a public presence. They have a website somewhere, and they become target. In fact, any software that runs in a public domain will be liable to attacks because it is in the public domain, and because unlike the 10 or 15 years ago kind of an environment where you had individuals, script kiddies or hackers trying to get into a system and see what can happen. Right now, we're looking at organized crime. We're looking at state actors that have very, very targeted and very well organized approach in attacking systems. We have also moved away significantly from the traditional zero-day operating system or browser attacks into using more elaborate and comprehensive solutions, things like social engineering or weaknesses in systems, identity systems, or even harnessing credentials from source code. And I will give you another example. Back in 2012, when I was managing my own website, I'm still managing my own blog, so I have my own website. It's running on the Ghost platform, which is one of the many platforms out there. And since I was running my Ghost website on an Azure web app, there is the ability to put your code in GitHub, and then every time you do a change or every time you update your website, that information gets automatically pushed into the Azure web app through a trigger. And as I was looking at that, I said, well, you know what, that's a rudimental CI/CD, which I love it. And why not use that one instead of me pushing files via FTP? So I, again, in my infinite wisdom, went and put my website onto GitHub. And then I woke up the next morning with my SendGrid account maxed out. And I thought I went viral. I was like, my God, 20,000 emails. That means I had 20,000 new subscribers. Unfortunately, that's not the case. What I totally forgot is that as I pushed my website into a public repository on GitHub, I forgot that I had my SendGrid credentials inside my GitHub repo. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but today there are tools, there are bots out there that will scan continuously GitHub for private keys, secrets, passwords, anything that can be used to attack websites. So rather than me going viral, as I was hoping overnight, I ended up disclosing my my SendGrid account, and someone used that to send spam. Luckily, I had a maximum limit of 20,000 emails on my free account, and I didn't get charged for anything more. But you can see how easy it is to forget something or disclose something you shouldn't have, and give the attackers the ability to attack. In fact, other attacks have taken place over the last few years that have used this kind of approach. They grab somebody's admin account that has a privileged access to systems and use those accounts to launch an attack from the inside. At the very top of these paste over here of different logos, you see some numbers. These numbers come from the Have I Been Pwned website, which is a website that Troy Hunt, the security consultant down in Australia, I don't know why he's down, anyway, from Australia, is maintaining. And the scary figures here show you how 507 websites have fallen victims to attacks. And what is worse is that they were maintaining passwords in such a way that was insecure, exposing all that information to the dark web, attackers, people that want to monetize from that. So 10.5 billion accounts have been disclosed up until this point. If you haven't used the website, I would urge you to go and put your emails that you use for shopping and working online to see whether your account has ever fallen victim to one of these hacks. The problem here is that, okay, you might say, well, I only used this website once. I only used Bell once or Domino's once, and I haven't used it ever since. But many people here, and I will raise my hand as the first person, I have reused passwords. Have you reused your passwords and your emails somewhere? Think about it. People tend to be quite lazy. We like to be lazy, and we want to be, I can't think of another email. I'll just go with my typical one or my usual password. I have a pattern which I used to follow. If you do that, please start using password managers. There are lots of free and paid solutions out there. I'm not going to provide names, but you can do your search. Please use a password manager. But if you're not, then if your account has ever fallen victim to one of these attacks, it means that the attackers will take that information and will try to enumerate other websites. They will try to log into Facebook and Netflix. In fact, it has happened to me before, so I am victim of my own stupidity. But they will try to log into other sites. And you might say, well, you know what? My Facebook account doesn't have any information or doesn't have any private stuff. True, but they can also use that information to take money from your friends. I don't know if you have read this before, but the FBI was saying that up to $500 million have been stolen like that when somebody takes a hold of your Facebook account and then they claim to be you and say, well, I got stuck, or I had an accident, or I had an emergency, I need somebody to send me money. And your friends will rush to help you because we want to be helpful to our friends in our community. And that means that attackers will take that information, steal money from your friends, and then it's very hard to prove that it wasn't you. So it's a very, very organized approach into attacking. So we don't want you to maintain your own databases, because if you think about it, you have to understand how the system is storing your information, how you're protecting your users' data from attacks, and how is it going to scale, how you're going to back it up, how is it going to withstand if an attack happens. Because trust me, if you are in the public domain, at some point you will be attacked. The question is how well your system will withstand that attack. So if you're looking at identity providers out there, Azure Active Directory is one of these identity providers. I work for Microsoft, so I'm slightly biased towards this system. But the figure I want to show you here is that the 30 billion daily authentication requests that are taking place. This is an insane amount of requests that happen on a daily basis from individuals, from companies. If you're using Office, for example, then you're authenticating users the system. So 30 billion is the scale that we're showing you here. Now, you might say, Chris, we don't even have 100,000 users. I don't care. Like, you might have 5 users. The whole point there is that you as a developer, if you are looking for an identity provider to help you authenticate and manage your users without you having to manage that, then Azure Active Directory will scale with your needs. You can start with 2 users per day, and you can go all the way to 1 billion users per day, and you'll still won't have to change your code. You don't have to manage those databases. You don't have to think about how are you going to do your backups and your stores and store that information securely. So that's the important bit here. I don't, the other information there is more like marketing fluff, but from my perspective, the fact that the scalability is there, it's a very important figure. You can scale, or we can scale with your systems. So Mary is sitting on her desk, her manager comes in and says, right, Mary, you need to add identity to our internal website. We want our users to sign in, and we don't want them to see all the data. We need to have different levels of privilege and what have you. So the first question you're going to ask yourself is, do I already have something in my infrastructure that can support it? Luckily, if you're already using Microsoft 365 or Azure, you already have a free Azure AD sitting there waiting for you to use. So straight out of the box, you get that. If you don't have Azure AD, then you can start with a Microsoft 365 developer account, which allows you to start interacting with Azure AD without really having to pay for anything. And then you can prove the value to your manager, so you can go and acquire that. But most of the companies that we know have Microsoft 365, and they're not even aware that there's an Azure AD behind the scenes. So now that you have established that you have an Azure AD somewhere, the next question is how easy it is to build authentication into my applications. And I will tell you, it varies from platform and language to language, but it usually takes less than 50 lines of code to add your sign in and sign out and benefit from advanced capabilities, which I will mention in a second. That means that with 50 lines of code, you don't have to worry about hashing, encrypting, storing, scaling, and what have you. In some cases, it can be as much as 1 line of code. And I will show you in ASP.NET Core today how you can achieve authentication with a single line of code out of the box. Does it support and integrate well with other platforms and tools and languages? Yes, we try to support as many languages as possible. We don't really care whether you're running on AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud or on premises. We will support you regardless. I think yesterday was the .NET conference focused on desktop, and one of our friends, Javier Lozano, demonstrated how you can use desktop, WPF, UWP, or WinForms apps with Azure AD to authenticate users and set the context of the current running user, which is a fantastic experience even for desktop applications. So we don't really care whether you're, Electron, Java, .NET. We will support you with libraries out of the box, and we're also very open with the support for standards. And finally, advanced security. Now, this is something I haven't touched up until this point, but think about it. You want your users to have multi-factor authentication. You want to support conditional access, where you can control access to who has access to the system from different locations or different time zones and what have you. So if I would say, I don't want US users to be able to access my data because of some data regulations, right? You as a developer having to implement that is extremely tricky. However, you as a consumer of an identity system like Azure AD can automatically benefit from conditional access without you having to write a single line of code. If you were to implement your own multi-factor authentication, which I did when I was writing my my own CMS, remember back in 2007, I had to use a number of different services to integrate. I had to use an email service, and I had to use a text, mobile texting service, because I had to be able to send the MFA information in various ways. So I had to integrate with the systems, which is okay. But then again, I had to also validate the incoming information. So what happens if somebody intercepts that email? What happens if somebody intercepts that text message? What happens if somebody sends that or tries to click on that link that I sent them, and they've done it after the timeout process? So there's a lot of complexity. In fact, I have a slide somewhere. I don't have it on this slide deck, but there's all the different components that make up the identity system that we have today. And it's just mind-boggling how many different components are required to have a complex identity system available to you. But you don't have to worry about all that. As I said, as a developer, your focus is pushing the software out of the door and benefiting from all the advanced capabilities. So the Microsoft Identity Platform provides reduced sign-in friction. We provide you with a consistent experience of integrating to your applications, and for your customers or your users to consistently sign in, and they have this knowledge as well of like, oh, I'm going to Azure AD, I know exactly what I need to do to authenticate. And in many cases, you benefit from things like single sign-on, where you don't even have to sign in anymore. Windows Hello or your biometrics or your existing account will be propagated into the new sign-in experience, so your users don't have to worry about that, whether it's a mobile, a web app, or a desktop application. Accessing organizational data, we will cover Microsoft Graph later on, but think about integrating with Azure databases or Azure components or Azure resources or other APIs that I have built, making that access easy and seamless as possible. It's an important component of our identity system. Complying with IT. Now, if your IT says everybody should have MFA, regardless of who they are, from the CEO all the way to the janitor when they sign in, that is something that you as a developer don't have to worry about, because the IT pro in the team, the IT admins of your Azure AD will configure that, and then that automatically gets propagated into your application. And finally, safeguarding access. We talked about your users' data and your data, and the fact that you don't have to, your application does not have to deal with user identity data is very important, but also providing you with the appropriate authorization tool, whether you're using groups or roles or any other custom functionality. We will support this kind of authorization where you implement the rules and your application automatically inherits them. And depending on which framework you use, sometimes role-based authentication or authorization can be super simple, sometimes it can be tricky. And in case you don't know, authentication is who am I, authorization is what can I do in the system. So we need to make sure that your applications provide support for both. Sometimes you just need to prove who you are so you can come into the system, but sometimes we need to know what can you do with the system if you're an admin or a simple user. So authorization and authentication are both part of an identity system and should be supported well. So now that hopefully I've convinced you that you don't want to maintain your identity database, what does it take to integrate with Azure AD? There are two main components. There are two basic things that you need to do. The first one is creating an app registration inside Azure AD. So you go into Azure AD, and I will show you how to do that in a second when we do our first demo. You write your app registration, you create that, where you show intent. You might say, I have a web app that needs to authenticate into the Azure AD, or you might say I have a console and I need to sign in my users through this solution. So once you do your app registration, whether you do it in the portal using a manual process, or whether you do it programmatically via our APIs like PowerShell, the CLI, or Graph, it doesn't matter. The next step is to write a little bit of code, as little as possible. I don't want you to write hundreds of thousands of lines of code. just to do identity. I don't want you to spend 2 months learning what OpenID Connect and OAuth 2 are. I just want you to use the bare minimum to create a secure solution. So to integrate, obviously we provide you with libraries out of the box. We have the Microsoft Authentication libraries, or MSAL, that are designed for clients and services, whether you have an interactive sign-in or whether you have some service, some headless daemon running somewhere, it needs to authenticate and access data. We provide you with the right libraries. However, you might say, well, Chris, hold on a second. My solution was written 5 years ago. It already uses Passport for Node.js. I don't want to have to strip all that out. You don't. As long as your libraries are OpenID Connect compliant, we provide you with the right endpoints to authenticate your users. So all you have to do is just point your Passport.js app library to the endpoints that we have for Azure AD or B2C, and then off you go. So as you can see, there are only two main bits when it comes to integrating with identity: an app registration and a library to integrate in your code. In some rare occasions, you might have to go back into Azure AD and say, my application, once it authenticates my users, it needs to come back and access an API or APIs. And for that to work, we need to create some kind of a trust system here. So my client application needs to be able to trust my API, and my API needs to trust my client app. So we might need to add another app registration there to create that trust between the various components that all use Azure AD as the common denominator to provide that trust. Supported identities. Again, at a very high level, we just need to make a decision between two different options. One is work and school accounts. Everyone that works for your organization at contoso.com, at microsoft.com, needs to sign into this system. So these are all internal users. These internal users can access the system from wherever they are via Azure AD. So if I need to sign into my HR website, for example, at Microsoft, I use my Microsoft account, but I'm doing it from home. So this is still an internal system, but only Microsoft employees can access our HR web system. So this is where Azure AD is providing your identity system. It's your identity provider, the Azure Active Directory. In some cases, though, you might say, well, I am writing a solution for my external customers. I am the next Walmart. I am the next Tesco. I am the next Etsy, and I want my users to come in. I want them to create a profile, and I want them to buy my stuff. I'm creating a forum for our friend. I'm creating this mobile app to manage, our World of Warcraft forum, and I want people to come and create their profiles. In that case, you can't use Azure AD because these are not internal users. These are random people that come and create profiles. For that, we're using Azure Active Directory B2C, business to consumer or business to customer, whatever you want to call it. And the whole point is that you start with a username and password, and that's the bare minimum requirement. You require your users to come in with a username and password. However, in some cases, they might say, I don't want to create yet another username and password. How about if I use my Twitter account or my Google account or my Facebook account? And that's the nice thing about Azure Active Directory B2C, the fact that you can add social media logins into your system. In fact, you can add any OpenID Connect compliant provider. So if there is some other service out there that has OpenID Connect support, then you can use them as an identity provider to your B2C. So they can use tweets, for example, to sign in to your web app. And finally, I'm not going to spend too much time here because, again, it's lovely to know that this system is not built on proprietary technology and it will support industry standards. But I don't want you to worry about too much what about OAuth 2 or OpenID Connect. The whole point is to get you off the ground and get you quickly building stuff. So let's go and build something with Microsoft Identity today, because the next one is a demo. Right, so if I go into my Azure Active Directory, let me find that window somewhere, which is here. There you go. So I've already signed in. We're going to create a brand new app registration, and I will go through the I have no idea what I'm doing kind of thing. So Scottish, let's go and create a new one, sorry. So new app registration, and we'll pretend I don't know JavaScript. So I'll let the website deal with the details. So first we need to add a name. So let's go Scottish Summit Demo 2. Can't remember if I created one. And then we just need to say, I'm going to sign in users for my organization. So I'll click register. And so remember we talked about the app registration. That bit is done now. I don't have to do anything else. Next, because I don't know how JavaScript integrates with our Azure Active Directory. I haven't looked at the libraries yet. I haven't looked at the docs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my quick starts here. So on the quick starts, we provide you with options on how you can integrate with different platforms, whether it's a web app, like traditional server-side web app, mobile app, daemon apps, and then single page apps. So since we're doing JavaScript, we'll go with the single page road. And the nice thing is that we support Angular, we support React. I think we're adding support for Vue later on. Blazor, if you are keen of Blazor, wasn't, but for now, I'm just gonna go with a JavaScript and using the latest auth flow. Next, it says you need an Azure subscription, which we already have since we're signed in. We need Node.js, which I have locally running, and Visual Studio Code. Any editor that works for you, this is just a recommendation. So the one thing that we need to do is say to our app registration where it's going to send the tokens that we acquire. So let's click on that, make the update. The token in effect is the user gets redirected to Azure Active Directory. They sign in there. And then instead of taking the credentials and passing them back to our application, which we said is a big no-no, it just sends back an encrypted document called a token, a JSON web token, a JOT or JWT. And that information contains everything we need to, as a developer, everything I need to understand who you are. It has my username usually, it has an email somewhere, and some other information to say where the token came from, whether it's valid or not, and what have you. So now that we have everything configured, I can go and download the sample, which came down here. I'm just gonna copy this one, put into my projects folder. Let's paste that there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is open it up and see what the code looks like. So that's the one we have, the JavaScript. Let's open it with code. And as I said, you can use any tool you want. It doesn't have to be code, but code is nice, really nice when you work with identity. So here, let me make this bigger. We have a very basic service running and listening at port 3000, but the juice of the application is under app. And to be honest, it has more files than it should have. So technically we have a static website, a static web page, an HTML page, and we have the two components needed for the authentication. We have an auth config. Here we have the information we need to point back to whichever Azure Active Directory we're using. You'll notice there's an authority here. That authority points to my Azure Active Directory, which I just used to register the app. And then at the very top, we have the client ID, which identifies the app registration. So now the code knows where to point the authentication. And then we provide you with two different ways. We have an auth pop-up and an auth redirect. One of them does a pop-up as it says on your web app, so you don't have to go somewhere else. The redirect takes the user to a different page, and then they come back. I find the pop-up more engaging and better UX, but it's totally down to you how you interact with it. Now, the necessary code to add sign in and sign out for your website is one line at line 3. And then we have line 48, which has less than 4 lines of code. And for the sign out, we have less than 2 lines of code. So as you can see, that's all it takes for me to sign in to my account. In fact, let's go and test that and see if it works. So let's open a new terminal. We can do npm install, just to install any packages that might be needed. Takes a few seconds to download half the internet. No, I'm just kidding. It's a small application. And then npm start. And this should start listening at port 3000, which is great. So now if I open my web app, if I open a new browser and navigate to localhost 3000, that's our application running. Let's sign in. Remember, use the pop-up by default. It already knows I have some sign-in account, which is great. So let's click on this one because I'm using my Microsoft tenant. The first thing it asks is, are you consenting as a user for this application to go and use your profile information? This is very similar to your mobile apps when they go and ask you for permission to access your data. So you need to be careful to make sure that you consent to that and you know which app it is. And then I can click on see profile. And this is the whole thing working end to end. So now I am signed in, I can see my information. I'm not going to read my emails because it will pull my actual emails from my actual tenant. So, but I can use my test tenant to demo the same thing. The nice thing here is that it took less than 10 lines of code to see, and some configuration to actually see everything working end to end. So we have JavaScript. And again, I said less than 20 lines of code to integrate with Identity. So hopefully that gives you a nice idea of how to go about. Let's go back to our slides very quickly. So we were here. Next, I love these slides because we want you to come as you are. And if you remember Nirvana, they had a fantastic song that had the same title. Bring your own tools, bring your own platform, bring your own language. This slide is, I don't know, I would probably call it provocative. We have everything that is not Microsoft. Apart from the identity at the very top, you see that we work with all these people. In fact, yesterday on the stream, we had somebody writing Kotlin with IntelliJ and integrating with the Microsoft Identity platform. So we learn how to do that. We work with the community. We work with everyone to make our tools and languages available to them. So if you are running on AWS and you need to secure your app, why not use Azure Active Directory? And we have customers that are multi-cloud, so we need to support them as well. We have customers running on prem, and we need to support them. So whether you're doing serverless, Kubernetes, or bare metal, again, we don't care. And most of the major languages are supported. And if you have one language that you would like to see more support, let's say, I don't know, Perl or Ruby. If there are no OpenID Connect libraries that you can bring there, then you can reach out to us and we can build one for you. So we work with the community for the community. However, if you are on the Microsoft Identity platform, there are some significant benefits when you are integrating the development experience via the Microsoft Identity platform. Today, if you are in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, you already are signed in with a user that probably has certain permissions to backend services like Azure or SharePoint or Exchange. And that means that you don't have to re-authenticate when you need to integrate with these tools. We also provide managed identity and local account support via our Azure SDKs library to easily speak to services. So a very good example is I have a web app that needs to speak to my SQL server, and usually we need a connection string. But what if I didn't have to use a connection string, and I could use my local account or the account that is configured for my web app to run with to automatically speak to SQL Server without connection strings and eliminate the need to pass secrets. That is an awesome premise, right? Or storage account or other services or that support managed identities. And at the other side of the spectrum, we have the Power Platform that allows developers to go and quickly build solutions without having to write code. And then these Power App or Power Apps or Power Platform solutions can pull information from other systems, again, using the same identity provider without you having to configure all that. So secretless apps, which I love. We talked about single sign-on. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but we do support single sign-on out of the box. If your devices are in-tuned or added to the network, then mobile and web apps, like I rarely sign into my mobile these days, and it runs a lot of Microsoft apps. I don't have to do that because single sign-on takes care of that with a Microsoft Authenticator. So it makes my life and my users' life a lot easier. The libraries that we talked about, again, I don't want to reiterate, we are building on top of open standards, OpenID Connect and OAuth 2, and we want to make sure that we provide you security by default. So the MSA library comes with all the benefits that you expect, and it's continuously updated to abide to the new standards like PKCE or PIXI and authorization flows. And it allows you to build richer experiences quicker without you having to learn the internals of the system. B2C is also something very important. We talked about the consumer experience. Now, if you're writing an app for your customers, you don't want them to feel like they're jumping to another website to authenticate and come back. And B2C provides you with this customization ability to create an authentication page or authentication pages that look and feel like your app. So they don't cause your users to feel like they're jumping around just to authenticate. So in this example, you see we have a supermarket creating this experience for their users, and you can do that too. And B2C, by the way, if you are creating consumer solutions, comes with 50,000 monthly active users. That means that the first 50,000 users can sign in as many times as they want for free on your system. Once you hit the 50,000 users, I think it's a great problem to have to start paying for it. So B2C is a very economical, very scalable solution for consumer apps. And I've already mentioned the social media sign-ins. You can create on the business side, you can have APIs, web apps, and consoles solutions all signing in via B2C and speaking to each other. So it's not just for front-facing solutions. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Microsoft Identity Web, which is the new library that we built specifically for ASP.NET Core. So if you are building solutions with ASP.NET, then we made your life even easier. So if Marsha can do it, then Bob can figure out how to use Microsoft Identity Web. And next, I'm going to jump into an example because I think it adds more value to show how to do it rather than tell you. So next directory, we'll make it IOB Summit Demo 2. I can't remember if I have one already, so play it safe. Yeah, I see I already have one. So we're in here. Let me clear everything out, and then let me minimize my slides so you can see what we're talking about. Let's put the focus on the code. So let's make it slightly bigger. So .NET new web app, and then this is going to create a brand new web app for us. And then here we are going to say --auth and single org. Hey Philip, just give me a second. I will get back to you on that question. So this one is going to create a brand new web app for us. And I'm going to open it in code again. You can use whichever editor you like. And here I'm going to zoom in just to show you how little code it takes to integrate with Identity, right? So we have our startup.cs, app settings. This is where, again, we want to configure which Azure Active Directory we want to point to. We would configure that. And then we have two libraries that we need to use. It's under here, the Microsoft Identity Web, and the UI is the sign-in that provides the experience for signing in and signing out. It's all built into the library, so you don't have to create your own pages to manage that. And then the startup, we have 2 lines of code, really. Line 32 and 33 that provide this. I did say 1 line, so I wasn't lying. We can rewrite this to be more concise. So I can go services, add Microsoft Web App Authentication, and then pass the configuration there. And in 1 line of code, we can actually integrate with Identity. And sorry, that's a lie, 2 lines. Line 63, you need to use authentication to make it work. So with that, that's all it takes to add authentication into a web app. If you were using a web API, it would be exactly the same. Add Microsoft Web API authentication and configuration. And then that allows the middleware to check the incoming tokens, make sure that they have the right claims, that they came from the right identity provider, that they are valid, and move on and authenticate and validate your users. So both APIs and web apps are super simple to build with our solution. And there is one final thing I want to cover. The Microsoft Identity Web library is not new. I mean, it's new, but it's built on top of MSAL. It just makes the authentication and token acquisition management a lot easier. It's available for .NET 3.1 and later. So gRPC, Blazor, ASP.NET Web APIs, web apps are all supported. For older versions of .NET and ASP.NET, you have to use MSAL. And then if you're in Java, JavaScript, and Python ecosystems, again, you have to use the MSAL library to sign in and acquire tokens. And finally, you can build your, or bring your own OpenID Connect and OAuth 2 compliant libraries. And we support anything that is built on top of these standards. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about Graph, because Graph, although not directly related to identity, it provides a lot of rich experiences for you and for your users. So every time you go into Outlook and you start typing your email, you usually get a number of suggestions about which people you should send that email to. And that is a graph call that the Outlook solution makes to make your life easier or other people's lives easier. So you don't have to go and look into the GAL to find out what's happening and what you need to do. If you've never used the Graph before, Microsoft Graph, then there is a very nice Graph Explorer, aka.ms GE. You can come in, you can start playing without even being authenticated. We have some sample data. Oh, damn, it automatically signed me in now to see single sign-on. I told you. So it signed me in, so I can go and check my profile. That's my actual work profile here. I can also check the beta endpoint, which is our everlasting beta testing environment. So new things that are about to come will go into the beta before. No, I don't want the activities. I just want beta me. And run the query. You get a lot more information on the beta endpoint. And talking about people, I did say, Outlook makes a call, and I can show you what that call looks like. People I work with all the time. So if I do a get, you see that John Patrick, who is my colleague and teammate, is at the very top, because he's the very first one I tend to send most of my emails. I think right below should be my manager, or Hannah, who is our project manager. And Graph allows you to integrate with all these different data you have. OneDrive, SharePoint, anything that is organizational data is available to you via the Graph. So it's the one API to rule them all. And you use the exact same authentication. Your users come in, they authenticate to your app, they grab their access tokens for Graph, and then that allows you to easily call Graph through your solution. And that was a very quick tour of the Microsoft Identity Platform. I'm aware that we have 3 minutes left, so I want to leave some time open for questions if you have any. Philip, let me just bring up the that question you had about, Samo, I see there. Oh no, sorry, that's not Samo. That's me, need to sign in. Signs me in. Azure Functions Microsoft Graph Extension. Okay, I haven't seen this one, but to be honest, it shouldn't be hard to go and have a look. In fact, if you really want to get in touch with us, we have aka.ms. We have a Discord channel where we answer questions like this for the community. So I'm going to put it on the chat. It's aka.ms 45. So Discord, and then join. And our Discord is in fact super active. I think there are already people there signed in today. There you go. We're discussing about identity issues and what have you, and I can have a look into your question and get back to you. I know that EasyAuth is supported. We are also working on new experiences for EasyAuth. I know that there was no default token binding out of the box, but people are working on that as well. The nice thing is that now you can also use Microsoft Identity.web. So if you are using .NET solutions, then Microsoft Identity.web integrates with Azure Functions, which makes the token validation a lot easier. In fact, there's a blog post by Sahil Donkey. There you go. Here's my. You see, it was at the very top. I will add it here, and this shows you how to integrate Microsoft Identity.web with Azure Functions if you want to do token validation. But I will look at the GitHub issue as well. And you can reach out to us anytime you want. Make sure you become part of the community. And if you like what you saw, if you'd like to learn more about identity, make sure to join us on the 45. So every Tuesday and Friday at 4 p.m. UK time. See, we even have a 4 p.m. UK time there, just for you friends. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your time. I hope that walking out of this session, now you know how to integrate with the Microsoft Identity Platform and why you shouldn't be using your own identity systems to store your users' information. I want you to be safe, and I want you to write secure software for you and your companies. So I appreciate that. Reach out if you have any questions. I think that's 45 minutes on the clock, which was great. Yeah, don't forget to do your session feedback, friends. It means I can come back next year as well.